After. It's a Wednesday morning. It's September the 12th of 2001, and you're looking at a live picture on the southern tip of Manhattan, an area that is normally quite congested at this hour with people heading to work, much of them in the financial markets, but the financial markets are closed, and the World Trade Center, where many of them were going to work, is gone this morning, victimized by terror attack of immense proportions yesterday morning. Hard to believe the attack is still less than 24 hours old, that in just 24 hours our world has changed so much.
It's a bit of good news this morning. A press conference held by the fire department in New York City saying that they're pulling people out of the rubble of the World Trade Center alive.
Well, that's good. That's good. You know, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We're going to ask Mayor Rudy Giuliani about that in just a moment.
There were also, Jane, a lot of questions about how those structures could have come down. Why couldn't they withstand the impact they took? As we understand it, it wasn't just the impact. It was that all of those planes, and all four of them, you should keep in mind, were bound for the West Coast. They were loaded with fuel. All four of those planes, when they crashed in there, created such a fireball that we're talking about temperatures that exceeded 8,000 degrees.
1,000 to 2,000 degrees,
and it literally melted the steel buttresses that held this up. It melted them like plastic, and in the wake of all of that, the buildings just crumbled.
Let's get the very latest this morning. Establishing the death toll from Tuesday's highly coordinated attack could take weeks, but it's expected to reach into the thousands. 157 people were on board the two planes that slammed into the World Trade Center. 64 people were on the jet that hit the Pentagon. And 45 people lost their lives when a fourth plane crashed into Pennsylvania. The federal government is open for business, and the U.S. military remains on high alert. Financial markets in this country are closed this morning. President Bush promises to find and punish those who are responsible and those who harbor them. Afghanistan says bin Laden is not involved, but fugitive terrorist Osama bin Laden is the primary suspect. U.S. officials believe they have evidence tying him to bin Laden's followers to the attack. Big oil companies are freezing prices in an effort to keep gasoline distribution steady. Major League Baseball was canceled on Tuesday night for the first time since D-Day. A decision on today's game is pending, and the NFL is considering rescheduling Sunday's games. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani is facing one of the most difficult tasks of his administration after the World Trade Center attacks yesterday. He's in New York. Mayor Giuliani, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you tell us about these reports that firefighters are pulling people out of the rubble alive this morning?
Well, we recovered two people, and there's a third one that we're in voice contact with, and hopefully there are others with him, but we're not sure of that right now.
Can you update us generally on the rescue efforts, Mayor?
Yeah, about 2,000 people worked throughout the night to try and recover as many people as possible, and also clear away the debris to allow a lot of the equipment to get in there that has to get in there. And we have also people from Verizon and Con Edison that have to deal with our utilities, our power, our electricity, and our telephone service. They've all worked throughout the night. And right now we have 1,000 firefighters that are part of the rescue effort. Many of them are looking for people that they know and have worked with side by side for years.
Yes, because there are about as many as 300 firefighters that are not accounted for this morning. Is that number accurate?
Well, the number now, that was correct last night. The number now is 202 firefighters that are unaccounted for, and about 56 or 57 police officers, New York City and Port Authority police officers that we're also searching for.
You spoke with many of those people before they went in the building to help evacuate the building before it collapsed.
Sure. I mean, I know them for years, and some of them I appointed, and I talked to some of them right before, maybe 10, 15 minutes before the building collapsed, and we lost them, and then had to talk to their families last night and explain it to them, which, of course, you can't explain, except to tell them what brave police officers and firefighters we have in New York City, which is really true. I mean, unbelievably brave and dedicated people.
Let's talk about the numbers overall, Mayor Giuliani. What are your worst fears this morning?
Well, the worst fears are that the numbers are going to be in the thousands. In addition to the police officers and firefighters, at the time that this attack took place, the building has typically thousands and thousands of people in it. The only thing that we don't know is how many people in the 1 hour window approximately that they had to leave the building, how many of them were able to get out. We know thousands did. We also know that there were a lot that were left behind, and I don't think we're going to know that number until the relief and rescue efforts take place over the next 2, 3, 4 days. We're ready for casualties in the thousands, meaning the medical examiner and the police and the support personnel that we have organized for this effort. So let's hope it's less than that, but that's what we're ready for.
And isn't it true that hospitals are expecting the largest wave of casualties this morning?
Well, sure, yeah. The hospitals yesterday performed magnificently. I mean, the ones very close to the zone, St. Vincent's Hospital, for example, really did unbelievable work. But all the hospitals in New York City, we have 170 of them, assisted and helped. And they're ready again today to do the same thing. So, and we got a lot of help from Governor Pataki and from the state. And President Bush made certain that there was a military deployment, including from the Navy, that hopefully is going to give the people of the city a kind of a sense of protection, that as they wake up this morning and as they focus on what happened, I think they're going to find that they're going to need that, and it'll be very comforting. As
Mayor of New York, Mr. Giuliani, can you tell us how this has affected you?
Well, I don't think I know. I mean, I lost some very, very good friends from the police department, the fire department. Barbara Olson and Ted Olson are very close friends of mine. It's going to affect me, I think, the way it'll affect thousands of other New Yorkers who will find that they lost people that they knew there. So the thing that we have to do is demonstrate that the spirit of New York City is not just buildings. The buildings are important to us, but the spirit of New York is about the spirit of its people, that we're a free people, that we're dedicated to democracy, and that we're not going to allow these cowards to stop New York from being the greatest city in the world, because it is, and it's going to continue to be.
Amen. Rudy Giuliani, thank you this morning. We'll be speaking again. Good luck today.
Thank you.
It is 7:36. Bryant.
All right. In Wilmington, Delaware, James Kallstrom is a former FBI agent who was the assistant director of the Bureau's New York field office. Mr. Kallstrom, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant.
We spoke, I guess, about 22 hours ago when this first started going down. Is this far, far worse than you ever imagined at the time?
Well, I think it's sinking into the psyche of America and the world. In 23 hours, we've seen the absolute worst of humanity, the cowards, the terrorists, the crazy people that did this horrendous act. And at the same time, we've seen the best of humanity, the brave firemen, police officers, rescue workers, civilians that have been so steadfast in their spirit, their support for this country. We heard a great speech from the president last night, and I think we'll have a very determined nation, and we'll get out of this tremendous tragedy.
You were involved following the attack in '93 on the bomb that was set off there that killed 6 at the World Trade Center. Did you ever believe that these structures could be brought down by terrorists?
You know, I don't know if we actually believed it. We hoped it would never happen. We thought it would never happen. But on the other hand, you know, we thought the chances of some major terrorist event someday, we hope not on our watch, we hoped not in our lifetime or our children's lifetime, but we knew there was a possibility.
What does this change about our future, particularly as it concerns structures like the World Trade Center? What kind of a future do we face now? I mean, can people work in a skyscraper with any degree of security?
Oh, I think so. I think we shouldn't think about dramatic changes to our way of life. I think what it does is it focuses us on, the importance of things that maybe heretofore we didn't focus on to the extent that we should as a country, as a civilization, as an individual human being. But, this is not going to make us change our way of life. I hope it doesn't. I don't think it needs to. This is a strong country. We'll rebound. I think the terrorists made a tremendous mistake. At the same time, they did this dastardly, cowardly, stupid thing, and that is they galvanized us to actually do something, I think, across the board with our allies and with the peace-loving people of the world. I think it will galvanize some action that will be effective.
Mr. Kallstrom, I spoke about this with you yesterday when we talked about how sophisticated the plan of evacuation was in existence at the World Trade Center. Knowing that building as you do, based on your experience with it in '93, the buildings came down to World Trade Center, came down about an hour and a half after it was attacked. The other one came down shortly thereafterwards. Could they have evacuated most of the people in those buildings in that time?
Boy, I don't know, Brian. You know, you had two jumbo jet type airplanes full of fuel, or almost full of fuel, ready to go to the West Coast. You know, the fire did probably more damage than the actual craft itself, hitting the buildings. What impact that had on the ability of the elevators, you know, how crowded and panicked the stairwells were. I think to the best of the ability of the system, after the initial attack in '93, I think the plans were as efficient and effective as they possibly could be.
Well, we hope for the best. James Kallstrom, second time in 24 hours. I thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
In the wake of the attack, Secretary of State Colin Powell cut short a trip in Latin America to return to the States. He's at the State Department. Mr. Secretary, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
What are your marching orders this morning, sir? What's on your to-do list?
The first thing I'm doing this morning, Brian, is one, making sure that all of our embassies around the world are safe and taking necessary precautionary actions. And we have about 25% of our embassies on suspended operation, but they'll all be coming back up in the course of the day, I'm quite sure. Next, the President has directed me to work with international organizations and our friends around the world to make the point that this is an assault against the civilized world, not just against the United States, and to mobilize them to respond to this assault diplomatically, militarily, with police actions, intelligence actions, and to make sure that those nations, as the President said last night, who might be harboring or providing comfort to these kinds of terrorist organizations, understand that we will be holding them accountable. And once this trail leads us to who is responsible, if there are nations that bear responsibility in that regard for hosting them, then we will be doing something about that as well.
We heard the President's words last night. I don't expect a specific timetable, but in general terms, how quickly can or will we respond?
We'll respond as soon as we can, and in the diplomatic sense.
Are we talking weeks? Are we talking months?
We just don't know, Brian, and it would be. I don't think it'd be proper for me to speculate without knowing exactly who the perpetrators are and whether there is something to respond to diplomatically. And in other ways, we can respond immediately. And I've been on the phone already with Kofi Annan at the UN, with Lord Robertson at NATO, and with Javier Solana at the European Union to get an international response to this, condemnation, consideration of other actions that the international community might take. Now, that just might sound like diplomatic speak, but it's important diplomatic speak because we want the entire world to come down and not only condemn this kind of activity, but together, united, to go after those who continue to believe that by killing innocent civilians, they can achieve political purposes. That has to be the response of the international community to kill that idea and root these organizations up once and for all.
Mr. Secretary, besides being a diplomat, you're also a military man. You know the topography, you know the landscape, both diplomatic and otherwise. How realistic is it to think we could track down the individuals who did this?
I think it is realistic. I think we have demonstrated in the past our ability to find people who have committed these sorts of terrorist acts. We have very, very competent people who know how to follow leads. Sometimes it takes a few weeks, sometimes it takes years. But we won't give up. We will find them, and they will be dealt with.
The question being asked often this morning, Mr. Secretary, is this, that ours is the most sophisticated defense system in the entire world, certainly the most expensive. To that question of how could we not have seen this coming, what do you say?
I say that we do have the best intelligence system. We have the best military in the face of the earth. But as has been demonstrated many times in the past, if you are a determined enemy and if you are prepared to go after soft targets, and if you're prepared to do it in ways that are rather different from anything we've seen before, unless we get something that cues us, something that gives us some indication that this kind of asymmetric attack is coming, we are always at risk. We can't defend against every single possibility short of shutting ourselves up into some kind of blockhouse. We're an open society. And so we have thwarted many terrorist attacks over the years, and some have been successful. But I can assure you that we have competent people working on this. We do have the best people working on it, but it is impossible to stop every potential attack that's coming our way.
Final note. Are we at war, Mr. Secretary?
I think the American people are not confused about the legalisms of this. When you saw those scenes coming out of New York and Washington today, the American people made a judgment. We are at war, and they want a comprehensive response. They want us to act as if we are at war, and we're going to do that diplomatically, militarily, picking options that will respond to this, searching out those who are responsible, those who harbored them. And so as we go through the legalisms of all of this and determine how to respond in the international community, the American people know what they saw yesterday, and what they believe they saw clearly was an act of war, not only against America, but against the international community, the community of peace. But they didn't hurt our spirit. They didn't hurt our resilience as a society. And we'll come back firmly. We are still very much intact as a society, as a nation, and we know how to respond.
Secretary of State Colin Powell, you're a busy man. Thank you for spending some time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, coming up on 746. Jane?
Bryant, rescue workers finally have some good news this morning. We have word that crews have found 6 people in the rubble of the World Trade Center, 5 firefighters and 1 police officer. And the search goes on for those who are still living in the rubble. There's no doubt that Tuesday's acts of terrorism will for a long time be etched in the minds of Americans. Hattie Kaufman is in Los Angeles with more on reaction. Hattie, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. I'm at the original Bob's Big Boy, all the way across the country, 3,000 miles from New York. But here, as everywhere else, there is only one topic of conversation this morning: the terror that struck America.
The television images stopped Americans in their tracks.
It's scary. It's very scary.
People got information however they could. Suddenly, America was a small town, everyone having the same conversation. Detroit.
This is like someone declared war on us.
Minneapolis.
It's just crazy. It's insanity.
Chicago.
I sat and watched the news in basic horror.
Nowhere was life normal. From coast to coast, tourist attractions shut down.
Disneyland is closed.
Why?
Because someone did some bad things.
America's favorite pastime was canceled. No professional baseball across the country. It was as if America stood still. Worried about shortages, drivers in the Midwest lined up, overwhelming gas stations. Many of those trying to go to work were turned back.
The building's closed now.
There were evacuations in downtown Minneapolis, the state capitol building in Iowa, a bank building in Charlotte, and federal buildings everywhere. In military bases across the country, new barriers and the highest state of alert.
Right now, they are checking every car that's on base.
Drivers stuck in traffic remained tuned to talk radio, where the shock turned to anger when one station invited Muslim guests.
Oh, God, I wish you guys were dead.
In reaction to the violence, Kmart stores removed all guns and ammunition from their shelves. Anger brought some to the street, but grief brought many more to places of worship. From a candlelight vigil in Seattle to a prayer service in Chicago to a synagogue in Los Angeles, people prayed for the victims and for America. Across the country, flags remained at half-staff as Americans came to terms with a new reality.
You think the world changed today?
Absolutely.
Here in Los Angeles, the Latin Grammys were supposed to be held last night. They were canceled. A Madonna concert was canceled. The primetime Emmys, which were scheduled for next week, have been postponed. And Jane, in Salt Lake City, officials planning for the Winter Olympics will announce today that the $200 million they budgeted for security may not be enough. Jane?
Hattie Kaufman in Los Angeles. Hattie, thank you. Congress is vowing to support President Bush in efforts to find and punish those responsible for the attacks. Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman is a member of the Armed Services Committee. He is in Washington this morning. Senator Lieberman, good morning.
Good morning.
What's the process now, Senator, of finding those who are responsible for this?
Well, that's up to the law enforcement agencies, and they have the full support of the Congress of the United States. But the point is, what more are we going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I feel very strongly that we're at war. An act of war was committed against us. It's more than a crime. It's certainly at least a war crime. And I think Congress has to effectively declare war against terrorism. And that means concentrating our efforts consistently until we win. And that also means that our allies in Europe and throughout the world have to join us in this war against terrorism, just as we joined them during the Second World War when they were attacked. And that means that all of us have to act together against some of the countries that harbor terrorists that are now our declared enemies.
So it would be fair to say if Osama bin Laden is pinned to this, which it increasingly seems he is, action wouldn't just be taken against him, but against the government that's harboring him.
I think we have to take action against whoever was responsible for this horrific act, particularly if it is Osama bin Laden. He's the natural suspect, although not conclusively now, but the natural suspect because of his capacity, his warnings, what he's done in the past. But we also then have to act very persistently against governments, not just Afghanistan, but Iraq, Iran, Syria, which we know are harboring terrorists. We have to focus in on the cells of terrorists that we know are in the United States, potential terrorists, let's say, and protect ourselves. We're at war.
Because clearly an organization of terrorism of this sort took more than just a few people to perpetuate.
This was a coordinated, sophisticated attack against the United States. And when you combine the kind of zealotry that leads people to take their own lives and not care about the lives of anyone else, and you put that together with the kind of money and resources that these people had, they threaten us and our way of life. And we've got to respond. We have to look at some of the ideas that have been talked about creating a Department of Homeland Defense, an agency of Homeland Defense. We never had to do that before because we felt we were protected by the oceans, but this is the beginning of a new age in American security and American life.
Indeed it is. Life has changed forever. Senator Joseph Lieberman, thank you.
Thank you.
On Capitol Hill this morning, Arizona Senator John McCain, who serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee, is with us. Senator McCain, good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We've heard many people say this morning that we're at war. Would you concur?
Absolutely. And there is no doubt that this is going to require, as Senator Lieberman said, diplomatic, economic, and military action, and it will not be easy, nor will it be short. Our message is we're coming, and God may have mercy on you, but we won't.
To what extent militarily, Senator, are we prepared for this?
I think we have the capacity. I think, obviously, we're going to have to improve our intelligence capabilities, particularly human intelligence, which we basically dismantled in the late 1970s. But we have the military capability, and Americans have the will. So I'm confident that we will uncover this network, which is spread throughout a number of countries. And as the President, in his excellent statement last night, said, those countries that shelter or allow these organizations to participate are just as culpable as those organizations that committed these atrocities.
A lot of people, Senator, this morning are asking the question, how could there have been lapses as significant as there were to allow this to happen in the first place?
Well, I think those questions are going to need to be answered, and clearly they will be. We have thwarted other efforts in the past. We did not succeed this time. I am convinced that we will undergo fundamental changes, and we will make sure that this will never be repeated. And there is no doubt that their effort is to destroy our society as we know it. America will survive. We're a strong and great nation.
Is there talk of how the U.S. must change security-wise to deal with the future?
I think our lives will be different, at airports particularly. I think we're going to have to discomfort Americans to some degree, but at the same time, we're not going to allow these threats to destroy a free and open society, and we're going to have to maintain a careful balance. But there's no doubt that there will be added, quote, inconveniences to American lives, in American life, and that obviously is a small price to pay.
Congress is convening this morning, Senator. Is this an effort to show solidarity at this moment in our history?
Absolutely, and it's to show the American people that we will return to a normal activities and a normal life, and we will not allow this tragedy to permanently damage America.
What specifically will you be doing today?
Well, we'll be having a debate and discussion, not much debate, but discussion over a resolution condemning these activities to start with, and then I think we'll go back to a lot of our normal work.
Senator John McCain, I appreciate your time. If you'd stay with us for just a moment.
Thank you.
It's 7:54. Some viewers will cut away now for local news, and we'll continue with our special edition of The Early Show, covering the attack on America.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Connolly along with Scott Wally, bringing you local coverage from our studio here at WBZ4 as well as UPN 38.
Here are the headlines in the local papers this morning. First of all, the Boston Herald. The headline is quite simple and succinct. War is the headline in the Herald this morning.
Yes, President Bush vowing to punish the faceless cowards, as he says, responsible for this terrible tragedy. Also here, as you can see, the Boston Globe headline, New Day of Infamy, referring to the original day of infamy, Pearl Harbor. Many folks saying this is worse than that horrible day back in 1944.
Bay State doctors, nurses, and medical technicians are on a mission of mercy to New York City. Meanwhile,
more than 50 members of the UMass Disaster Medicine Assistance Team left for New York City about 1:30 this morning. They are taking medical supplies with them and will set up a field hospital in the heart of the disaster zone. Many of these volunteers have worked on other disasters, but they have never experienced anything like this.
I think we're really in unknown territory because of the magnitude of this disaster. We aren't really sure what the medical needs will be of these people. This is like a major earthquake occurring in a very populated part of our country.
The field hospital can run for 3 days at a time. A second or third team may be sent out if they're needed.
here in Boston, the Red Cross asking that blood donations be given after tomorrow.
Right.
So that's from the Red Cross here locally. Let's get a check on your Wednesday morning commute, shall we, with Rich Kirkland. Rich?
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Bumper-to-bumper traffic, Scott, in two main roadways getting into the city. Nothing to do with the attacks yesterday, of course, but the bumper-to-bumper traffic starts on the on the Tobin, Chelsea to Charlestown. They're waiting about 45 minutes to come into town here, and they're only now beginning the move, Scott, on Route 93. Quickly to the map, let me show you how far back it goes. You know where Commerce Way is up here in Wilmington? Well, it's bumper-to-bumper traffic. Wilmington, right down past 128, all the way into Stoneham, Medford, Somerville, and Boston. 93 is a bumper-to-bumper mess because of an accident and a stuck bus we had earlier downtown. On the expressway, one long line of heavy traffic. Let's go live there by the expressway. Braintree to Boston. Also heavy traffic on the South Shore again, as a lot of the commuters are coming a little bit later today. There's some difficulty on the Turnpike thanks to an accident earlier in the Natick area, but traffic is moving on the Turnpike all right. But as you see, Soldiers Field Road, Storer Drive, coming down to Kenmore Square, past the Harvard Business School, bumper-to-bumper traffic as well. So right now, the very, very heavy traffic, North Shore, South Shore, and the Metro West, too. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ4 News. Here's Carrie and Scott.
All right, Rich, thank you. Let's go ahead and head over to the weather office. Barry Burbank has a look at our forecast for today. Barry, good morning.
Good morning, Carrie and Scott and everybody. It looks like a beautiful morning. It's a clear sky out there. We have plenty of bright sunshine. It's 60 degrees in Boston. It's 61 down in New York City. It'll be sunny down there as well today. It's cool out in the suburbs. We got many readings down in the 40s in the nearby suburbs at that, especially in the lowlands. Now we're watching Hurricane Erin, which is still spinning at sea with winds of hurricane strength, but slowly moving towards the east, so Erin should be moving on out of the picture eventually. On the other hand, we do have cloudiness, which will be spinning across northern New England this afternoon. We'll see just a few scattered clouds coming up from the west and southwest here. So overall, calling for sunshine today as the temperature goes up to about the middle 70s inland. In terms of cloud cover, we won't see much around here, even this afternoon, just a few patches of clouds perhaps, but across northern New England a bit more across the mountains. A light breeze everywhere from New York City up to Boston. It will be turning on shore at 5 to 15 miles an hour, so not much higher than the upper 60s at the immediate coast, ranging up to 73 to 76 inland a few miles. We have a high tide this evening, a low tide early this afternoon. Now, there is a chance we'll get some rain in here coming in late tomorrow and into Friday morning, perhaps a couple of scattered showers or thunder showers later tomorrow afternoon as the front comes down through. And then we'll get some rain on the back side of the front here early Friday morning as the cold air becomes established in here. And the winds will be cold out of the north and northeast. In fact, we probably won't have temperatures much out of the upper 50s for highs on Friday. And then it looks like Saturday should be basically sunny with a few patches of fair weather clouds up to 60 to 65 after a chilly start. And then on Sunday, it'll be warming up a little bit more than that, 65 to 70, essentially sunny. So tomorrow is a transition day, a couple of showers coming up in the afternoon. And that's your latest forecast, Carrie and Scott.
All right, Barry, thank you very much. Logan Airport is a federal crime scene this morning. It remains closed, as do airports all over the country. Our Dan Reyes down at the airport. We're going to be talking to him in just a moment when we continue on UPN 38. For those of you watching us here on WBZ4, we are now going back to the early show. UPN 38.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into